people think when they arrive they can flex their muscles and puff their chest and do their thing as the top guy. And the reality is, he's not the greatest by any means. The greatest is the servant. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. When I had my Corvette, it's funny because as I got older and I got faster cars, I drove slower. Ask my wife, she'll tell you that's true. So I loved driving up to a red light in my Corvette, which was a very fast car. It was actually souped up because it used to be a pace car for the Indy races, Indy 500. So it was one of the pace cars. And it was a very fast car, and it was very loud. But you know what I loved the most? I loved it more than just taking off and beating everybody on the line. Is for someone to come up to me, think they could race me, then when it turns green, to just slowly leave. I get more joy out of that than burning those tires and leaving them in the dust. It's like, I have the power to destroy you, but I'm not going to. And I just drove slow the rest of my life. I don't know how it is. Just now, when I'm on the road, I just like to cruise. Like, this is my time. And I could beat you, but I'm not going to. Okay? My wife, she's still learning this lesson. She has a very fast truck, and she likes to show. There's no lesson. She has no lesson. She has a fast truck, so she likes to. Anyway,
I exercise the full potential.
She exercises the full potential of her truck. The opposite. It says in humility in Matthew chapter 18, verse 4. In humility, there's exaltation. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So it's the opposite, right? It's an upside down lifestyle. Humble yourself. Listen, you could be the smartest one in this room, but the smartest one is the one that humbles themselves and never talks about being the smartest one in this room. If you hear somebody always talking about their accomplishments and their greatness and how smart they are and how they've accomplished this and that, they're probably not the smartest one in the room. Okay? I learned the hard way a couple times that the one that talks the most is usually the one that's the least mature and experienced. Yeah, I do have a story for that one. You've all heard it though. The opposite. In submission, there is authority. Jesus went with them, and this is in Luke. Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. And that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. But you see how even though you have authority, you still have to submit to authority. And you can't have authority until you've learned to submit to authority. That's why there have been many leaders in the church that have come and they've gone because they want to come for the authority, but they don't want to submit to authority, and they leave when they realize it doesn't work that way. So, we don't care about your certificates, we don't care about your degrees, we don't care about your trophies. What we care about is, are you able and willing to submit to authority? Because you don't get authority unless you are. And it's not just about willing and able, it's have you. Have you submitted to authority? Have you served under somebody for any length of time longer than 2 years? Because I've seen people come to me and they think they were qualified because they've been in ministry for 30 years. And I ask them, who'd you serve under? Well, I went this. And they've got 15 churches that they served under for 2 years or less. You know what that equates to me? 0. You say you have 30 years. In my book, you have 0. 0. Well, you know what? If I granted a little grace, I'd say you have 2 years, because that's the longest you were ever under somebody. Once you start again, it resets. Then you go somewhere else, it resets again. So you have to learn to submit to authority before you're given authority. So now there's men right now in our church that are training for ministry and striving to be a pastor. And you know what I told them? I said, listen, before I license you, before I send you out, before I launch you, you have to sit here for at least 5 years. They're like, 5 years? Like, you got a problem with that? Why 5 years? Because 5 years it's pretty decent enough time. A lot can change in 5 years, but if you stick it out for 5 years, you've shown that you have a little bit of tenure and you have a little bit of submission. Because it used to be just 2 years. A lot of people say 2 years, and even a lot of denominations like 2 years. You have to be here for 2 years, or you have, and then even some denominations, they're still in the habit of you be here for 2 years and they move you somewhere else. I'm like, how does that train you up to be submitted to anybody? At that point, your leadership is all transactional. It's not relational at all. You're just trying to put in your time. That's not really how it works. So in order to gain authority, you have to be able to submit to authority. Okay? The right side up lifestyle of the kingdom of God is living by God's principles and wisdom. It is an attitude of submission and obedience to God, not because of fear or duty, but desiring to please Him. Why? Because of all He has done for us. Because in doing so, we find fulfillment. Because of our love for Him. Page 92 of my book says, it's always better to position ourselves for the future rather than position ourselves for the present. If you position yourself for the future, you will already be positioned correctly for your present, and your past will be a past to be proud of. Too many of us are trying to position ourselves for where we're at today. But today, we should be positioning ourselves for where we're going to be in the future. So my wife and I have had several talks recently about our future, because, in fact, this came up in our pastor's meeting yesterday. There's a difference between a hired pastor and a non-hired pastor. Now, I'm not talking about a pastor who gets paid versus a pastor who doesn't get paid. I'm talking about a hired pastor versus a non-hired pastor. So there's hired pastors and then there's church planters. Okay? I'm a church planter. So nobody hired me to come here. We planted this church from the ground up with nothing. Okay? Now granted, we partnered with another denomination, and that had its own benefits and blessings to it. Okay? God had His reasons for that. But we're church planters. Nobody hired us to come in. Okay? So nobody can fire us either. That's how I like it. Okay? Now you can leave if you want to leave, but you can't fire me. Right? Now why is there a big difference in that? There's a big difference because if you're a hired pastor, then what you're doing is not as relational, it's transactional. So when you're a hired pastor, the board, the executives, the elders, they have a checklist of things that you have to do. If you don't accomplish those things, you're gone. It's all transactional. Whereas me, it's all relational. So when I met Mark and Jennifer at the fairgrounds at a concert, we got to talking. And there was the beginning of a relationship there, not the beginning of transaction. Okay? I didn't say, hey, Mark and Jennifer, I'll pay you X amount, come and help me out. There was none of that.
No.
In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I told them, man, I need a lot of help. I can't pay you a dime. Can you come? You know, but they're here, right? They're here because there's a relational thing there. There's a relational submission there, okay? So in my pastor's meeting, this came up. This came up. Between the church planter and the hireling, the one difference is that the hireling may have a 401k or some kind of retirement plan if they are hired as pastors. A lot of larger churches They hire a new pastor, they vote him in, and it comes with benefits, it comes with health, medical, all that. It comes with a retirement package, blah, blah, blah. Whereas me, I don't have that. So, if something were to happen to me today, there is no retirement plan in this church for Pastor Kevin. There's no 401k that will take care of me if something happens. There's nothing. So my wife and I are having a conversation, and you'll understand how this applies to you in just a second. My wife and I are having this conversation, and at my age, I'm starting to get this sense of urgency to make sure I'm taken care of and that my kids are taken care of should something happen to me in the near future. Because I'm not getting any younger, right? So without a retirement plan, without a 401k, what does Pastor Kevin do when something happens in the near future, if it happens in the near future, or when I turn 65, 75, 80, and I can't do what I'm doing today? There's a sense of urgency. So what am I doing today? Today I'm positioning myself, I'm working very hard and very long hours to position myself not for today, but for the next 10 years, the next 15 years, the next 20 years. I work very hard. This is why I have so many companies that I work under or for or own. Okay? This is why I travel so much, because I'm positioning myself not for today, but for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road. It is better to position yourself for the future than to position yourself for today. Today is going to be over in a few hours. But you still have tomorrow coming. So whatever you do today should be positioning yourself for tomorrow. Does that make sense? People tell me all the time that they're broke, they don't know what they're going to do, they don't know what they're going to do to pay their rent next month, etc., etc., etc. They talk about that all the time. And my response would be, well, what are you doing to position yourself to be able to pay your rent tomorrow? Okay. Well, I don't know what to do. Well, just do something. You have to go get another job. You have to sell something. You have to have a yard sale. What do you have to do to position yourself for a better tomorrow? Whatever that is, you got to do it. It's always better to position yourself for the future than to try to position yourself for today. Because today is going to be over in a few hours. You have to position yourself. If you can't pay your rent today, it's because you didn't position yourself a week ago, a month ago. If you can't pay your light bills because you didn't position yourself properly earlier. Well, I tried. No, you didn't. You bought a $5 cup of coffee is what you did. Not all of you, I'm just using that as an example. Because coffee shops are very popular in the Pacific Northwest. People are addicted. Are you? Yeah, so you're positioning yourself to be successful, right? You're positioning yourself to be successful. You know how many people come to me with their financial woes and they're driving a car with a $550 a month payment? Plus interest. They're like, well, at the time we could afford it. Yeah, but you were positioning yourself for the day that you bought it. You weren't positioning yourself for a year from now when you still have a car payment for 6 more years and now you can't pay your rent or your light bill. So I don't get on my political soapbox, but I will get on this one because people are stuck. You know what they're doing? They're positioning themselves for a poverty mentality. Mm-hmm. They've positioned themselves in a poverty mentality. And not only that, this is what's really dangerous. Remember when we talked about culture? When you take on a poverty mentality because of how you position yourself, you end up in a culture that is all poverty driven. And it's hard to break, remember? So I can't do anything, I tried. You know why you can't? Because you've already succumbed and conceded to a poverty culture. And that's hard to break. It's hard to break. It takes prayer, discipline, it takes a lot to break that poverty mentality. But when you're in that culture, it's tough. A ton of people. I saw a young man just yesterday, and my daughter, she likes to to feed the homeless. She has a lot of compassion for the homeless, as do I. However, when I drive by a guy that looks like he's 25 years old holding a sign that has more muscles than me, I'm like, bro, why are you holding that sign? You can work. You've got strength in your bones. You've got muscles to push stuff. You can do so much, but you're stuck in this culture, this poverty culture, and you can't break out.
And there's jobs everywhere.
There's jobs everywhere. I'm not trying to be non-compassionate. I'm trying to prove a point that you choose the culture that you live in.
I know an elderly man that really needed somebody to come and help on his property because he had quite a bit of acreage.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to all these people, 15 people standing on the street saying, need work for food.
And none of them would do it.
And none of them would take the job.
Right, because they're stuck in a culture. They're stuck in a culture. Let me ask you this, just to drive in the point. How many of you, now that we've talked that through, and again, this is not being non-compassionate to the homeless, okay? We like to bless the homeless. We have homeless that come to our church, okay? So I'm not trying to be non-compassionate. But to Sue's point, how many of you believe that they're stuck in a culture and that's the only reason why they're on the street corner holding a sign?
Well,
Yeah.
my other take, I mean, yes,
Mhm.
but, in Salem, the closure of the mental health facilities, the not supporting mental illness, and the drug problem, the self-medicating because they can't get access to the meds they need. Yes.
So I'm talking aside from the mental, because
Okay.
I've done I have a
Right.
lot of documentation analysis on the actual percentages of the mental versus the lazy
Yes.
versus
Yeah.
there are actual numbers that are documented to
Yeah.
support what you're saying. However, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a culture that short of not being able to get medical help,
Mhm.
they're stuck
Yeah.
in a culture.
Their attitude is, why should I work when the government gives me food?
That's exactly
Or-
right.
Or I get social
Yeah.
security, or I get welfare.
And Sue,
they live off
and
the
that's the percentage, the chunk of people outside of the medical
Yeah.
issues. That's the chunk of people, and I know that exists because we have family members that are stuck in that. Personal family members that are healthy, physically able, but they say it with their words.
Mhm.
I get-
I'm getting a check every week. I don't want to waste that.
Yeah.
You can
And it
get
might
Right.
be
more
more
doing
than
it.
minimum wage or
And if you
whatever.
maybe more
Yes.
than minimum wage,
Yes.
you're exactly right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't want to get too far off of that tangent, but how many of you would agree
Mhm.
that there are people out there that are fully capable outside of the mental capacity?
Yes.
There are people that are fully capable, but they're stuck holding a sign because they got swallowed up by a culture that they now live
Yes.
in, right? How many would agree that they're only holding a sign because they can't break out of that culture?
There's people who aren't homeless who have that culture.
Yes,
Oh, yes.
you're right.
Yes.
No, you're right.
I know people.
Now you're right. Okay, was that 100% of you?
Yeah.
Does anybody disagree?
No.
Okay. If we can, let me just throw this at you. If we can agree that there are people stuck in a poverty mentality because of the culture that they're in, they're stuck. It's the only reason. You said it's the only reason. Okay? They're physically able, they're physically capable, they have the capacity, okay? But they can't because they're stuck. If that's true for them, is it possible that it can be true on the opposite side?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Think about how that could change your life forever. I don't want to be stuck in the poverty mentality culture. I want to be stuck in the blessed life culture.
Yes.
Folks, can I tell you something? I'm stuck right now in the blessed life culture. And I don't mind telling you that. Because I can't teach it if I can't show you by example. I'm stuck in the blessed life. That doesn't mean I'm living in a mansion or that I have the perfect cars or that I have everything that I've ever dreamed of, because there are other things that I dream of. Maureen knows what they are.
Excuse me.
There's a car that I would dream to drive one day. I don't have everything that I've dreamed of, but I'm stuck in the blessed life. I can't escape it.
No,
I
when
can't get out of it.
When I was a little girl, there was 4 kids and my parents, and we lived in a shack. We had an outhouse out back, we had 4 rooms, all 4 of us slept in the same room. Welfare, hand-me-downs, creditors coming to our house, took all our furniture and everything away. The light bill went off, and the lights went off because we couldn't pay the bills. My dad could work, but he refused to work, you know. So we had this poverty mentality
Mhm.
like big time.
Mhm.
And when I grew up and I was in high school, I was doing my homework after I'd already gone to school. I did all my chores, blah, blah, blah. My mother just sat on her butt all day and didn't do nothing. I'm not meaning to be rude, but she came into my room and she said, Susan, I would like you to go do this and this. And I said, Mom, I have a real important test tomorrow, and I've done this and this and this today. I've got to get this done. Why don't you go do that? You haven't done anything today. And she goes, well, why is that so important to you? Because you're just going to get married and have children right out of high school. And I said, I don't even have a boyfriend that I'm interested in. I'm a senior. Who says that I want to get married right out of high school and have children and be poor? I don't want to be poor. I want to get a good grade. I don't want to live in poverty. I want to make something out of my life.
Mhm.
And God just kept leading me in that direction. And today, I have a husband who saved every single year from 20 years old
Yeah.
for life insurance,
Yeah.
for our future. And we've been married 45 years this June.
Amen.
I live in a nice house. And I'm the only person in my family that broke out of that poverty
Yeah.
mentality. The rest of my siblings have always remained there.
Yeah.
And they just look at me and, wow, now I have a nice house. Yes, but,
Yeah.
you know, they won't listen.
Yeah.
So,
You submitted yourself to a different culture, and now that's the difference.
Yeah, one thing I want to say to that, and I'm not saying that she's wrong, because there is a poverty mentality. People get stuck in, this is all I'll ever be, this is all I'll ever have, you know. But then sometimes you can actually be physically in that position, but not have the mentality of poverty. Because I can remember when we were young, and our dad was gone quite a bit, and it was just my mom home with four children by herself. And we didn't have a lot of money. My parents both worked, but we didn't have a lot of money. And my mom used to take a can of Spam and make some rice, and she would make it seem like this is the meal of a king. You know, their mentality with where we were at kept our mentality from getting stuck there. So sometimes your physical might say, this is what we have, but it's the mentality you take on and the state of your mind and your heart while you're there too. So it can be either or with what your physical looks like, and you end up going further later because you never got stuck there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Yep. And that brings us to a point where you have to be able to see with your spiritual eyes and not your physical eyes.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, you let your perspective and you let what you see in the natural get in the way of vision in the spiritual, and you can't do that. So, to your point, Sue, even though she was subjected to a poverty mentality, she didn't allow that to block her vision of getting out and not being subjected to that. So she was subjected to it as a child, but she chose a different culture. And that was good. That was good. For my wife, and even myself, I remember growing up with Pastor Maria and my mom, and we had Spam and rice. We had top ramen a lot. We had the block cheese, and we had all of that. We had all of that. But the difference is that, just like Christy, my parents, even though we had the block cheese and the top ramen and the Spam and rice, we didn't take on a mentality of poverty.
Yes.
So we didn't subject ourselves to a culture of poverty, even though what we had in the physical looked like to the world, that's a poverty living. But we didn't subject our mind to that.
Right.
Yes.
And we broke out because it wasn't our mentality, it wasn't our culture, it wasn't who we really were. That's another good point, is that what you see in the physical doesn't necessarily mean that's who you really are,
Correct.
right?
Right.
So, all right.
Um,
Let me start living in the light, and then we'll. I don't remember when our first break is. Is it like now?
Yeah, let's do
Right
one
now?
for about 5, 10, somewhere in there.
5 minutes?
But yeah,
10
5 minutes, and then we can go for another one.
Okay.
Added.
All right. So we'll take a break for 5 to 10, and then we'll go for another couple of chapters.